What if I told you everything you know about Vikings is wrong? Well, it's time to learn about one of history's greatest misconceptions. Everyone knows that Vikings wore horned helmets, right? Wrong. This iconic image of a fierce Viking warrior with a horned helmet is so deeply ingrained in our culture that it even shows up in video games like For Honor and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And if you've ever attended a Renaissance fair, you've probably seen plenty of horned helmets there too. But despite what you may have seen in movies or video games, real Viking helmets never had horns. So, where did this iconic look come from? Let's take a journey back to 16th century Germany. During the 1500s, German writers began to publish stories of a mythical race of people known as the Huns. These stories claimed that the Huns were an ancient people who lived in Scandinavia and were known for their fierce fighting skills and bloodthirsty ways. To the 16th century Germans, the Vikings were as exotic and mysterious as the ancient Egyptians were to Europeans in the 1800s. In fact, the word Hun was synonymous with wild man in German literature, much like the word Viking was synonymous with ferocious warrior in modern works. But although the Germans created the myth of the horned Viking, they weren't the first people to use horned helmets in battle. That honor belongs to the Celts. Celtic warriors from Ireland and Northern Europe used simple bronze helmets with a pair of horns attached to the sides. When the Romans would have looked at these horned helmets, they would have seen a terrifying sight, because to the Romans, anything that wasn't Greek or Roman was barbaric. As a result, the Romans wrote about the terrifying barbarians from the north who fought in horned helmets. During the Middle Ages, manuscripts from the British Isles also show Celtic warriors wearing horned helmets. So when the Germans created the myth of the Huns in the 1500s, they likely based these horned helmets off of earlier depictions of the Celts as savage enemies. The Germans probably didn't even know that the Vikings existed until about a century after they started writing about the Huns. But how did the horned helmet go from being associated with the Huns to being associated with the Vikings? Well, that's all thanks to one man, Danish artist and author Ludvig Norden. In 1740, Norden published a book called The Danish Alexander. Although the book was a historical fiction piece, Norden claimed that the story was based on real events from the Viking Age. One of the main characters in the story was a Viking warrior named Amleth, who would later become the inspiration for Shakespeare's Hamlet. In the book, Norden described Amleth's helmet, saying that it had a bull's head mounted on it with two long horns that went upward towards the sky. This image of the fierce Viking warrior wearing a horned helmet captivated the public imagination. Unfortunately for Norda, his publisher went bankrupt shortly after he released the book, which prevented him from making any money off of the artwork. But by the 1800s, the horned Viking helmet had become a cultural icon. Today, we know that not only did Vikings not wear horned helmets, they probably wouldn't have even thought it was a good idea. If they had, a helmet with long horns on the side would have made a warrior's head an easy target for swords and axes. In fact, archaeological evidence suggests that Vikings preferred simple round helmets made out of iron, leather, or composite materials. Some helmets had nasal bars or a neck guard, but no horns. Still, we can't blame them for wanting to wear such a cool hat. Now watch. Did real mummies have horns? Or check out, why do we call Vikings when we mean Vikings?